I recently read an article in the Wall Street Journal called America's Young Men Are Falling Even Further Behind. In it, journalist Rachel Wolf followed Dan and Joanna Moreno's family, including their 4 adult kids, 1 girl and 3 boys. Now, out of the 4 kids, only their daughter was independent, while their 3 sons are all single, still live in a home, and their only work experience is working for the family business, a repair chain called Flamingo Appliance Service in Miami, Florida. It's not like their parents necessarily want them to live at home. Their father, Dan, says, "We love them. We love having them around, but that's not how you build a life." Out of the 3 boys, 2 dropped out of college while their oldest never even went. The Moreno daughter, on the other hand, recently graduated business school and is even engaged, which is great. And while those 2 milestones don't need to equate to a successful life, her milestones juxtaposed with all of her brothers makes you wonder, what happened? No degrees, no job experience, living at home with her mama. I can't imagine TLC would be pleased by any of this. Now, we can't take these 3 men and make blanket judgments about men across the board, right? Well, according to Wolf, among non-caregivers who aren't disabled, men are more likely to be neither employed, in school, nor in workforce training, what economists refer to as NEET, which is a really cruel acronym that stands for not in education, employment, or training. This story is a snapshot of a growing problem facing young men in America. As young women are seizing new opportunities, many young men are left feeling aimless and unmotivated. If you're expecting me to give a woe is me speech about how men are being harmed by society and it's time that men are respected again, I'm not doing that. That's not going to happen over here. That said, my hope is to acknowledge a few truths in a conversation, because if millions of young men, young American men, are struggling with the social skills and employment and education and so on, I think it's worth a well-rounded conversation about how we move forward from here. Men are relatively low on the totem pole when it comes to societal sympathy, and you know what? I get it, I truly do. But no matter what you think, struggling boys turn into struggling men, and if somehow they become dads, then struggling dads pass those struggles on to their kids. At what point do we pause to course correct? Today, we're exploring why so many young men are falling behind, the factors contributing to this trend, and how it's affecting families, communities, and the economy. Thanks for being here for this episode of Course Set Forever, because as parents, we've got the best seats in the house. Let's enjoy them. When I was younger, my grandparents owned a restaurant in Lake George, New York called the Trading Post. I loved that place as I spent a lot of my time there as a kid. The Trading Post was a bar/restaurant that had been in our family for close to 4 decades. My grandparents used to run it with my great-grandma, so it was quite literally a real family business. As a kid, I spent the majority of my time in the office drawing pictures of Ninja Turtles, as one does. But even then, I always noticed how hard my grandma worked. She'd sign for deliveries, set up the restaurant, and clean it relentlessly. I clearly didn't know this at the time, but she handled all the payroll, all the hiring, and even all the firing. Grandpa ran that place through and through. And while my grandma ran the place, it was my grandpa who got all the credit. Now, to be fair, I was really young, so I probably didn't see everything he did. But my grandpa did have a seat at the bar, literally with his name on it. And when the customers would come in, my grandpa would always be chatting it up with them, almost like he was the host of the party. I knew there was a disparity, and seeing my grandma do the work yet rarely get the credit always kind of bothered me. My grandpa was able to get most of the credit because he was a man. Even though if my grandma took a month off, I'm sure the Trading Post would not have been able to operate. For decades, you'd find men in sales, marketing, and leadership positions making big bucks because that's just how it was. You didn't question why the executive leadership team took 3-hour lunches. You didn't question why managers spent all Tuesday on the golf course. You didn't question why the C-suite was filled with men. It's just how it was. Now fast forward to today, and you'll see that women's participation in the workforce is up 6 percentage points in just the past 10 years. While the share of young men in the labor market hasn't grown in over a decade. As of August, 700,000 fewer men are employed or looking for work compared to 2004. As of August, 700,000 fewer men are employed or looking for work compared to 2004. The life trajectories of young men and women are changing quickly, with men struggling more in today's evolving workforce. When I see quotes like this, my brain jumps to, why is that? Kevin M. Roy, masculinity researcher at the University of Maryland, says until the past decade or so, there was an assumption that men just needed to show up for their life and they'll be able to get a job and have a family and be provided for because they're men. That's not the case anymore. Not only are women competing for jobs that even 10 years ago would have probably gone to men, they are killing it in their roles, taking space on boards, in the C-suite, in the engineering field, and so much more. For decades, whether it was explicit or not, men were under the impression that things would just naturally get better over time. But the reason they got better in the first place was often because of the women in their lives. Around 260,000 more 16 to 29-year-old men than women were categorized as NEET as of the first half of 2024. Now again, NEET stands for not in employment, education, or training, just to be clear. This stat is crazy to me because it touches on three things. Let's say you are struggling, and for full transparency, I get it. I've received unemployment checks on 2 separate occasions within the past 2 years. It sucks trying to swim upstream. But if you are struggling, traditionally, there are 3 paths to try to move forward. Employments, of course, even if that means taking roles that you feel are beneath your skill level, and listen, been there, done that. Education, meaning you go back to school and to see if you can earn a degree that will put you ahead in the workforce. Or training, which hopefully would either reskill or upskill your background to put you on a different path. In Rich Wolf's story, you had 3 men, all brothers, who were doing none of this. Almost as if they accepted their fate as men who'd be living with their parents forever. With traditional gender roles shifting and fewer pathways in the workforce, young men are increasingly feeling a crisis of purpose. The article goes on to say that Kevin Roy and other social scientists cite shifts away from traditional gender roles and single-earner family structures, as well as declines in traditionally male-dominated industries such as manufacturing as part of the reason. Women, conversely, are flooding the labor market, thanks in part to more remote work opportunities. As the world is changing, women are taking advantage of those changes. You could also argue they are rightfully pushing for change as well. And while society progresses and the employment gender gap starts to tighten a little bit, men like Daniel Moreno are stuck, not knowing how to move forward. After dropping out of college during his sophomore year, following indecisions about his major that spiraled into a larger existential crisis, Daniel said, "I just felt so lost. I didn't know what I was doing it for." And while most could argue that he could have gone back to school, chartered another course, whatever, Daniel would probably agree with you by saying, "Nothing is really stopping me. It's just myself standing in my own way." Generally speaking, men have this need to be needed. If you've ever heard this or wondered it, it's actually true and studies back it up. Jen Birch, author of The Love Gap, A Radical Plan to Win in Life and Love, told the Washington Post, there was a recent Pew research that looked at what men and women thought the societal pressures were for men and women. The vast majority put being a provider and career success at the top for men. Now, again, generally speaking, I like to stay away from men need this or men need that, but since this isn't my opinion, I feel comfortable saying that men want to feel needed. As dumb as this sounds, even when my wife is like, "Can you grab that bowl for me up there?" I feel like I've got purpose, even if it's something as trivial as just being 6 feet tall. I mentioned earlier how I've received unemployment checks on 2 separate occasions over the past 2 years. Now that's because I've been let go twice, and both times it hurt. The funny thing is, I knew in my soul I didn't fit at either place. One place I felt like a butcher at a vegetarian restaurant, while the other place I knew when I got an offer on the spot that I was in trouble. Both times when I got the severance check, no matter how much I didn't want to be there, it also sucked to feel like I wasn't needed anymore. I've spent time in therapy and I've had to work through a lot of anxiety. But the feeling of knowing that you're no longer needed is traumatic, whether it's in a relationship, a job, or even society. This lack of purpose is leading to feelings of isolation, low self-worth, and increased mental health struggles among young men. And here's the kicker, and I don't mind generalizing here, but men are really bad at talking about their feelings. I know this because, source, I am a man. Funny enough, I can write about my feelings all day long. I'll write a post about masculinity and everything related to vulnerability, but I struggle to text my friends when I'm really going through it. Though, if we're together in person, I'm more open to share my feelings. Richard Reeves, president of the American Institute for Boys and Men, says men rely more heavily on in person activities to maintain social connections. Based on everything we're talking about, you can imagine why men are struggling so hard to come out of this pandemic. Wolf writes young men are lonelier as a result. Those ages 18 to 30 spent 18% more time alone last year, an average of 6.6 non sleeping hours, than in 2019, according to Purdue's analysis of American Time Use Survey data. That is 22% more alone time than reported by women in the same age range. The suicide rate for men aged 25 to 34 has increased by 30% since 2010, which is the largest rise among any age group. This is why I'll never stop talking about men's health. I understand that when we talk about groups of people who deserve our warmth and care and empathy, young men aren't exactly high on anyone's list. Men took advantage of their place in society for centuries and are just now starting to come down to earth. Why should anybody care about them? You're right, women had to fight for the rights that they have today, and even those rights are in constant danger because of a massive amount of misinformation. We may be disillusioned, and you know what? Generally speaking, men probably didn't do enough in our effort to build a more equitable society for women. I'll give you that. Everything you think and say and do around this topic is probably at least 51% correct. But when the number one killer of men under 45 is themselves, and when men who are just getting started in life are dying by suicide at a rate of 30% higher than prior to 2010, well, I think it's time that we dive into the root cause of what's happening here. Young men are struggling to find their place in society and are often not receiving the emotional or mental health support that they need. There's a whole bunch of podcast hosts and YouTubers whose revenue model is built on lies, telling young men that they've just got to be more dominant, more alpha. You run shit around here, and anyone who tells you otherwise is a weak, pathetic, feminine, woke person who doesn't know what it means to be a real man. Listen, this type of language is making young men paranoid, and in short, they're giving these boys guns with faulty ammunition and zero training. Society is lying to these men, and society has been lying to these men. We've been on this track for a minute, but throw in a global pandemic and further remove true community, and you've got yourself a recipe for disaster. In this article, Wolf speaks to 21-year-old Ronan Convery, who, in regards to life post-pandemic, says, I was so ready to be back and hanging out with people in person that I didn't actually spend time to think, hey, are these people I'm hanging out with good people? I turned off all my safety warnings. His grades and mental health quickly deteriorated. I had no idea how to moderate, Convery says, adding that choking on his own vomit after drinking too much one night was a wake-up call. He said, I had no idea about the dangers of what I was doing, how it affected my brain, my mood, my everything. You don't have to take the account of one young man to paint a broader picture, but ask yourself this one question. Looking at the state of the world right now, do you think young men are doing okay? You can take issue with everything around this question, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a majority of people who say yes. So where do we go from here? Number one, we have to redefine success for young men. Our definition of success is skewed, but for young men, it's a damn near impossible bar to reach. Make $1 million, have a fancy car, have the hottest wife, live in a mansion. All of this is superficial, and often you'll find that people who quote-unquote check all the boxes are absolutely miserable, because if the only thing that matters to you are external proof points, then sooner or later your idea of success becomes irrelevant because it can never be achieved. Parents, educators, and mentors should broaden their definition of success, and all of us should talk about this more. It's not just about traditional jobs or what's in a bank account, but it's about finding purpose and meaning in most of our pursuits. As a writer and podcaster, if my only goal today is to have the number one podcast in the world, well, I'll never achieve this goal. But if my goal is to hit 100 downloads, then I can expand to 200, then 500, then 1,000. Success is in the process of building something special, and it's time we're honest about what success looks like. Number two, we have to create pathways to connection. We talked about what the pandemic did to personal connections, and we'll likely dissect what COVID-19 did to society for a long, long time. There are a million takeaways, but one I'd like to touch on is the importance of human connection. We need to build spaces where young men can connect authentically, share their experiences, and feel supported. Humans crave connections, and it doesn't have to mean you're a type A personality. I'm certainly not. I need my space and silence just like the best of them. But when men are able to surround themselves with men who are honest about their successes and faults, we start to see that this perfectly curated life that we see online portrayed, it's not only misleading, but it's a lie. Connection can happen in a bunch of different places, but please don't let our young men isolate themselves from the world. We need them, and they need us. Number three, we have to promote emotional literacy. One of the biggest lies men have ever been told is that feelings are for women. Like, biologically, what does that even mean? Men have feelings. We've got strong feelings. Have you ever seen a man who's about to lose his fantasy football week because his quarterback threw an interception in the fourth quarter? Trust me, men have emotions. We got a lot of them. We've got to help young men build emotional literacy by normalizing conversations about feelings and providing tools to articulate their emotions. It doesn't always have to be about what I'm really feeling in this moment. Sometimes when my wife asks me what I think about a particular subject, I don't have strong feelings either way. It's a big old shoulder shrug. I don't need to manufacture my emotions. But if I snap at my kids uncharacteristically after a long day, I might need to dive into what caused that. Why am I feeling exhausted? Why am I feeling angry? Let's tap into what's really going on without just saying, I'm fine, when everyone can look at me and knows I'm not. And number four, we have to support mental health initiatives. I see men in the gym all the time. Now, I say that figuratively because I don't actually really go to the gym. But if I did, I bet I would see a ton of dudes there. Things are a whole lot better today than even 5 years ago when I'm talking about men's mental health. That said, there is still a historical stigma that we're working to overcome when it comes to men in therapy. Some see it as unnecessary while others view it as weak. Rachel Wolf spoke to a number of young men in her article, and the common denominator is that young men were struggling to process their life, work, and places in the world. I get it. I've been there. I am there. But having a professional help us work through some of our biggest struggles helps center our thoughts in a more productive manner than simply hoping that things will magically get better over time. We need to advocate for increased mental health resources targeted specifically at young men, including therapy, support groups, and accessible counseling options, because when young men know there are credible non-podcasting options to turn to in order to get their lives back on track, then we can start building a better future for every one of us. Thanks for being here for Courtside Forever, where our goal is to ensure that parents enjoy the best seats in the house. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend or two, and feel free to reach out with any questions or comments. I'm your host, Ryan Rucker, and I appreciate you being here. Take care.